All right. So you also did one on a favorite topic of mine that we somehow have not done a podcast on
Oh,
yet.
I'm nervous.
Oh, you know what this one is. You did one on Princess Diana.
Ah, yes.
What'd you?
Princess
I
Diana.
haven't watched this one yet. What'd you do there?
So I looked into the whole story itself. You know, I went through timestamps of, you know, when she left the hotel on the day of her death and the day of her death, and then up until when the car crash happened and, you know, she died shortly after. And I just wanted to go through that, just understand how that happened, what led up to it. And, you know, for those who don't know Princess Diana, she was arguably, if not the most famous person of the 20th century.
Yes.
Her wedding was seen by 750 million people in 1981.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1980.
Yeah, it might be 1981.
It was it? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
That's what was it? 6 times bigger than this last year's Super Bowl. Just 1980. Like, that's crazy, just to put that in context. And then 1 billion people watched her funeral. So this person was quite literally like the most famous person on the planet, which is just wild to think about. And the lead up to her death and her life, you know, the royal family has always been an interest for many people, and it's fascinating because it's a monarchy that's dead, but also they don't really have any political swing, but they do. It's just a weird thing with that whole royal family thing.
They don't have any. They have a light official political swing.
Yes.
But a strong behind the scenes.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And just her relationship with Charles and what led up to that, like they met when she was like 16, and you know, he was quite a bit older. There was a gap there, but then they didn't get married until she was 19. So, you know, a couple of years jumped, and then it was like, all right, I'm going to land you.
He's like, we'll wait around for you.
Yeah. And then unfortunately to her, you know, from what I've read is that he was continuing his affair with Camilla, his previous lover, up until literally she had an encounter with him where they were at a party and he's talking to Camilla.
Yes.
And Diana went up and be like, I want my husband back. And she was like, you already have everything. You have the world. And she's like, yeah, I want my husband back. So I can only imagine the circles, what that was like. And they just spun on a dime and walked away.
He never, and this is where I empathize with him a bit. He never wanted to marry her. He never loved her. I mean, to all of us, that seems crazy. She was a rocket and like the sweetest lady, it seems like. But he didn't want that. His family wanted that, and because Camilla was married when he was carrying, he had wanted to marry Camilla, and then they said, I forget what it was, but they're like, no, we don't want you doing that. So she married someone else, and they continued to be in love. And then she could have divorced, and they're like, nope, you still can't do that. And they made him marry this girl that made sense because I think her grandmother was like the lady in waiting for the queen
there
or
was
something.
some royalty connection.
And they're like, oh, she's perfect. And so he never wanted that. And I've always felt a little bad for that because it's almost like, you know, yeah, they're royals. They live in this palace, and a lot of the attitude is like, fuck them. And I get that. But also they're like a bird in a cage sometimes too. Yeah. And everyone just gets to poke their finger in and say, no, you could do this and do that. And
yeah.
That's kind of what they did to him.
And the amount of fame that came with Princess Diana, like it was like their relationship. Obviously, there's the queen, which everyone knows about, but they were the couple that through the 80s up until the 90s, the divorce being so public, everyone knew every single thing that was happening. When she and them were, I guess, they weren't divorced, but they weren't seeing each other for a period, she'd go on trips. Like there's video of her where she was in the Caribbean with a friend, and there's paparazzi all over the place on this island that's like really remote. And I think about that, and I'm just like, the amount of fame was probably so overwhelming. And then there's the Princess Diana tapes that came out a decade later from her speech coach. Mm-hmm. And you hear them, and it's so funny. When it comes down to these people.
I'm sorry, it was from...
There's the bodyguard.
It was but it was from the author. What was his name? He's a famous author. I've thought about having him in. He was her biographer. She did an unauthorized, like she would record the tapes and then like have a courier deliver them to him so he could write the book. Andrew Morton.
There we go.
Right. Andrew Morton.
Yes. Yeah. But you hear the tapes, and what it comes down to is you realize these people, despite all the fame, despite the power and all this, they're human beings.
Yes.
Like she was a torn, very tortured soul during that period. You can tell like she was a wreck.
She was a child when she got pulled into this.
Yeah.
Imagine getting married. You're the most famous woman in the world when you're 19 years old.
Yeah. And how much of like she was so counter to the royal family too.
Yes.
With the AIDS missions where she'd be hugging and touching the babies.
Which
where they were like
hated.
they're like, no, we don't do that. And she's like, I'm gonna do it. I don't care. Like they're human beings. To her, like hanging out with the celebrities and icons and laughing and joking with them, where it was almost like the two worlds, the royal family and like that were kind of separated, where it's like, we're up here, you're down here. She would go down and meet you at the level. And it's like, hey, I'm just a human being. So I could see why she was so beloved. Like people, I can understand that. And then getting to it where you then get to the 1997 incident where she dies. You know, I read the book by Thomas Gordon, Gideon Spies. We've talked about this. And
tell people what that is.
So Gideon Spies is essentially a collection of interviews from Mossad agents by Thomas Gordon, who allegedly had this premier access, which again is debated because you're talking about one of the most elite intel organizations in the world. And he's talking to these agents. And the first chapter of the book is about Princess Diana, which I didn't think I was going to be reading about. And you hear about Henri Paul, the driver, who was also the security manager of the hotel manager.
That is one of the few times I've ever read a book where every hair on my body stood up.
Yeah.
When I read that part where they revealed Henri Paul, I was like,
so I'm reading this, and again, I'm taking everything with a grain of salt, just because you're telling me you're having all these Mossad agents come forward telling you all these things. Like, I don't know what to believe. He's had some other books. He did one on Robert Maxwell and all that stuff. But you're reading this and you're learning how like Henri Paul was being built up as an asset with Mossad, and there was MI6 connection there.
There was a guy, if I remember this correctly. There was a Katya, which was their term for a covert spy in Paris, who had been working on Henri Paul as a source at the Ritz, because a lot of Middle Eastern barons would meet there, and they wanted someone who wasn't like the manager, like all the way at the top, but also wasn't the janitor. And he was perfect because he had access. He was kind of a middle guy. He's like the driver. And there's evidence that that guy was actually outside among the press in the front when they were escaping out the back.
Yep.
That night.
And the other tie being that she was seeing Egyptian billionaire son Dodi.
Dodi Fayed.
Dodi Fayed. And Dodi's father has been very vocal about this, being he believes it's an MI6.
Mohammed Fayed.
Yeah, there's an MI6 connection with Mossad. Like he's 100%, he's been on air about it. He's convinced of that. So that's interesting.
He's always been convinced of that.
Yeah, he's always been convinced of that. But you read it, Bert, where it was like, you know, in his bank account, there was like $200,000. There's a weird anomalies with Henri Paul, and that, you know, that night he was drinking too much, and they pin it essentially on the fact that he was a bit drunk, and then they were coming down into the pass, and they hit a white Fiat, and then they hit the wall, and then it was an immediate crash. And I actually saw an interview, I think it was on the LAD Bible channel, the Lad Bible or whatever they call it, where it was with Dr. Richard Shepherdson, who's a forensics expert, the #1 premier one in the UK. And because of the conspiracies that came around the death, they asked him 2 years later, like, we need you to do a re-forensics of the bodies because this is getting out of control.
Wait, he got access to Princess Diana's body?
He got access to the forensic reports, I think. I don't know about the bodies. I think it was the forensic reports. That'd be something to look up. But he got access to it because he said there was just the multitude of just emails and just the public image of just, they thought there was some sort of inside job and conspiracies. And they're like, we need to put that to rest, because his best friend or colleague worked on the case. And he was overly convinced that it was an accident. Everyone always points towards the white Fiat, because what ended up happening is they couldn't find it, and then they found it, and they found that it was painted red, which was very weird. Just a weird anomaly. So everyone's like, what was the white Fiat? Who's connected to it? It was some Vietnamese guy that was driving it, apparently, and he got hit and I guess scared and ran away. Again, that's another thread to pull on. But then you're hearing this forensic expert, and he's breaking down how the impact, what ended up happening is no one was wearing seatbelts except the bodyguard. And as soon as the impact was made,
who lived?
It was the bodyguard. I can't remember his name.
Paul, John Paul. Can we
Anderson?
look up
Anderson?
John Paul Anderson, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, can we look up Princess Diana bodyguard lived? John Paul. What do we got?
Come on, photographic memory.
I think it's John Paul Anderson. That sounds right.
Or that might be the photographer, or
Trevor Rees Jones. It was another three-namer, but whatever.
So essentially,
I feel like John Paul Anderson's a director.
no, he's no.
Yeah.
No. You're totally right,
Man,
though.
the wires got crossed up there.
No, you're right. He's connected. John Paul Anderson is connected to the case. He is.
What?
To the fiat. You're totally right. Yeah.
John Paul, not Paul Thomas. Whatever.
No. This is not. There will be blood. Okay.
Okay.
So
All
no,
right,
what
we
ends
get
up happening in the forensics report is what he said is the immediate impact. Henri Paul and the driver went in. Henri Paul instantly killed, just smash.
Mm-hmm.
But he was in the seatbelt, and what ended up happening is Princess Diana was thrown forward with hit right here really hard, and then Dottie was
killed instantly.
Yeah, killed instantly. Yeah. And what ended up happening is they thought actually Princess Diana was okay, but what he said was essentially like it moved the internal organs so hard that I think the heart.
There's a small valve in the heart. Like they came up upon her and she said, "What's happened?"
Yeah.
And
how
kind
terrible.
of was fading in and out. And there's a small valve in her heart, which is a little sketch. Like nothing else got broken. Like she looked perfect, but there's a little valve, which is possible. It's possible.
Yeah.
But, this small valve they didn't realize had a leak. But where it gets weird, I don't know if you pulled on this. They took her to like the farthest away hospital.
Yeah.
I forget how long it took to get there. But like when people talked about coming in to see her body, like the family and whatever, they're like, she looked normal as hell.
Yeah,
You couldn't even tell she was in an accident at all.
Yeah.
So, what was that? How long did it take to get to the hospital? Like a half hour or something?
Something ridiculous where it took way too long, where it was like, this is strange. And then
They took the scenic route.
Yeah, and then this is where it gets very
Got
weird.
a baguette,
And this is where the quote-unquote conspiracy theorists have another point to hold on to, and that is in one of the letters that Princess Diana wrote to the bodyguard, she quite literally said, Prince Charles is trying to kill me, and it'll be in a motorcade accident, like a motor vehicle accident. And it was a letter that this bodyguard revealed. And it is the most bizarre thing. It is in her handwriting and everything. And he held on to it and released it a few years in the 2000s later. And it's just like, that is so strange. And this was the bodyguard that was with her 24/7 watching everything. And it's like, look, there's a few threads there that are very bizarre. I can't tell you what it is. All we have are these pieces of evidence. You have the forensics expert saying this was a normal crash. That was terrible. They could have been saved if they had seatbelts, but they didn't, so they died.
Wait, was that the bodyguard or the butler?
Probably the butler or one of the two.
That's important.
Yes,
because her bodyguard, she was tight with both of them. Her bodyguard seems to be no. That's a different guy.
Okay.
The bodyguard, it's been a while since I looked at this. He's like a reliable seeming kind of guy. The butler, there's been problems, and the sons haven't talked to him for years because he was like trying to get fame around this. So when claims are made to him, we got to look at that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, so let's look at that because someone had the note. That said.
Who did Diana write the note about Charles Motorcade to? Let's start there. There's a lot to pick. God, I haven't looked at this in a while, but there's a lot in this case. Princess Diana letter claims Charles was planning an accident in her car 10 months before fatal crash. Go down. All right. So Paul Burrell.
Burrell.
So that's the butler. Yeah, this guy, there's been some issues there. So maybe that really did happen. But there's questions around his validity. Now, God, there's so much to bite off here. I remember I went on a podcast as a guest. This is 2021. And I used to look at this case. And this was one of those. He was asking me about like the death and if I thought it was a conspiracy. And this was one I always thought. I'm like, no, it's not. And I was so strong on it. I was like, it's like, no. There's no conspiracy here. She died in a car accident. And it kind of switched for me when I read Gideon's Spies, and then
that's what happens.
I'm like, And I remember texting that kid. I'm like, this might have been a really cold take, but yeah. So Princess Diana, a lot of people would have wanted her dead. A lot of people. And it's like old British society kind of shit. I will say I've never bought that Charles would have wanted it. I don't think he's that good of an actor. When you see him after she died, he's broken. Now, I guess like some people, they do something bad and they're broken. That's a possible argument, but like that's a broken man. And I don't think it was because, he loved her or anything. I think it's because this is the mother of my kids and like her life was cursed for this to happen to her to get to this point. But it's an important one to me. That's why we have the Funko here.
Yeah, there she is.
Of her on there because that's my first memory.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I'll never forget that. I walked into the room, this little, my dad used to have like a room that he would, it wasn't a closet, but like he'd get ready in there while my mom was sleeping because he'd get up early. So I walked in this room and there's like a little TV in the corner. And I walk out of my room as a 3-year-old, walk right into that room, and my dad's sitting on the ground, like crammed in front of the TV, watching the funeral procession. And I remember it was the part where they're traveling away from London and everyone's throwing the flowers. And I'll never forget that image. And I was like, what are you watching? And he goes, because he's realizing like he's going to have to explain like death or something right now. Yeah. And I'm like a little kid. And he's like, the princess, they're driving her to heaven. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, she's in that car right there, and they're driving her to heaven right now, and I'm watching it. And he said something like that. It was really, like, profound. So as I got older, I, like, studied her life a lot.
Yeah.
And if you look at all the angles, she did have a thing for Middle Eastern men.
Oh, she
which
did.
was a big no-no for the British family, who's all about white society. And so, she almost married that heart surgeon. I forget his name now. We looked that up. Heart surgeon Diana almost married. It was like the one guy she was ever fully in love with. And really good guy. Asnat Khan, that's right. And they blew a gasket about that. But, like I was saying, she was forced to grow up like out of nowhere.
Oh my gosh.
Under this thumb and this thing and like this job and this duty, that they have. And she was like you pointed out, she was a real person. So then her marriage breaks down and she goes and she starts dating a guy like that in secret for a long time. They didn't like that. And then she's with Dodi Fayed, who was a bit of a playboy, also Middle Eastern. His dad had been trying to like hobnob with the queen forever as like an outsider Egyptian in British high society. He owned Harrods.
Yeah.
And, she was also, she was a major activist, especially after her marriage. She was doing all the landmine stuff. She was the first person that was completely bigger than the crown, all of it put together. And so you could say on the one hand, oh, so the crown wanted her dead.
She was a threat.
I don't think that's what it was. I think it's some other stuff. But somebody wanted her dead. And somebody made sure it happened. Maybe, the crown is like, damn, it'd be great if she could be gone. And some other people are like, yeah, we'll take care of this. You know what I mean? Like,
MI6.
They don't have to. Yeah. And they're just
Take
like,
note.
They're like, yeah, they probably would be better off. They don't have to do anything. And that would make it also easier to cover it up. But it does seem, when you put it all together, the way it was tied together so perfect. They got her body out of there like same day.
Oh my God.
They got, and it's hard to say that there wasn't some sort of influence there. I saw someone the other day make a claim. I think this is just like recency bias, but they're like, oh, she was going to come out supporting Palestine. So
oh my gosh.
They had to get rid of her. And I'm like, I don't think.
All right, dude.
I think that's enough internet for today. But there's so many possibilities and so many places, but she was a flawed person just like all of us, but she was an amazing woman, clearly like an incredible mom as well. And I think people should really admire like a lot of the things she did to be a rebel for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And she also, we always talk about the IMU theory.
Mm-hmm.
bro, she was that. She might have been a royal, but she was an outsider. She was a young girl trying to figure it out, stick it to the man, being told by authority what to do, trying to just raise her kids and love them in a marriage with a man that she loved, but he didn't. So they're both having midlife crises. And then she's got to be a divorcee. And like, people are like, oh my God, this is like a normal, it's like reality TV. It's a normal person. They saw themselves in her, and that made her as beautiful as she was as well. Obviously, most people aren't that beautiful, but it made her larger than life.
Totally.
I would love to do not necessarily a podcast, even like digging into who killed her, but like I'd love to do a podcast with like a Tina Brown or someone like that who covered her, or an Andrew Morton, and really get into her life, because as you said, she was the most famous person on the planet, and there is something to be said for that.
Oh my gosh. Like, you're rivaling Michael Jackson, people like that at the time.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say that was also a bit strange, and I'm just pulling on the threads that I find that people are using as like, this is why it was an inside job or whatever, was also the Queen Elizabeth connection, where she and her, for whatever reason, didn't seem to be as close as she said in those tapes. And then when she died, the Queen didn't say anything for a period of time.
4 days or 5, something like that.
And I think the show The Crown or whatever it was, they did a good depiction of this.
Have you ever watched that?
I've not watched it.
It's a top 5 show of all time for me.
Oof.
They did that great of a job.
Yeah.
The 6th season is a little
Okay.
but the acting's incredible. But the first 4 seasons are perfect television.
Okay.
5th season is really good.
So I watched the clip of the Queen, that scene where they're going through and she's being prepped for this, and it was, I couldn't tell if she didn't know what to say, and it was something so dramatic, and she was such a counter to what the royal family was, that she wanted to say it right, or she was trying to be there for her kids, or, is it suspicious? But that was so strange to think it took 4 days to respond to your daughter-in-law, who just passed away in the most horrific thing, and all of Britain's waiting to hear. And you're leaving them in silence. It just seemed,
The whole thing was odd.
it's very odd. That was one point where I'm like, that's something that I can see where people pull on. And
Yes,
it's just,
absolutely.
I get that. So yeah, the whole case, her, iconic, and just a tragedy of what happened, and fascinating story.
Yeah, a lot there. So we got to figure that out. I've had that on the list for a while. We haven't done any reach outs, but we should do something about that. One more thing before we talk about your news and all that, which we'll get to. And we actually just did a really fun podcast with our friend John Rondi, where we
Johnny
went
Drinks.
very deep on that for a long time. So what we're doing today is very different from that. So this will be out after that. So everyone go check that out. That link will be down below. That was a lot of fun doing that, the 3 of us. But, did you watch this Jordan Peterson thing?
Yeah, I did. I watched bit and pieces, not
The
the whole
Jubilee?
thing. Yeah, I watched bit and pieces just because it was kind of hard to swallow. It was just like, this is.
Yeah, not a great day for him. He didn't do well. But the Jordan Peterson takedown thing that's happening right now from the right wing, more than anything actually, feels a little strange to me. Like, he had a bad day. He didn't do well. I've had my differences with some things that he says and thinks and styles he has in the past, but by and large, I think he's done some positive things for especially a lot of young men, and it seems very weird that people are trying to take him down and attack him for, his relationship with Christianity. I always get very uptight when people decide to litigate every single thing that their religion's supposed to mean, and if you don't adhere to that perfectly, you therefore aren't in the club. This is one thing I took issue with Wes Huff when he was in here on and talked about Jordan Peterson. I thought, and we went back and forth on that. I thought that was bullshit. But I mean, you've been a long time fan of the guy. Like, do you find this a little weird that they're coming after him this hard?
Yes, I do find it a bit strange, but I understand it.
You understand it?
Yeah, I understand it. Just because the people that are coming at him the hardest, you have the atheists, but I think even harder than them are even the Christians. And a lot being because of the fact is, as a Christian, there's this expectation that you're going to claim who your savior is wherever you go, in a weird way, where it's like, my Lord and Savior is Jesus Christ. That's for me. That's my personal truth, whatever. And he's never publicly stated that. And he's been very cryptic when he answers the questions of like, do you believe in Jesus? And he'll always be like, what do you mean by believe?
well, what do you mean by Jesus? Because
Yes.
Jesus could be another dimension.
And I get what he's doing here. It's not a game to him. It's not a game.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Out of people talking about the Bible, I think Jordan Peterson today is the greatest spokesman on the Bible. And he might not even be a Christian, which is weird. Because the way he describes it, he is taking these concepts of what is God, what is belief, what is giving your life and dying by something you believe. Because many of us just say these things, but it's like he takes it the step further where it's like, what is the psychoanalysis there? Like, are you willing to die for what you believe? And I could be like, totally. Well, push comes to shove, let's really see. And for him, he has a hard time making that conclusion of being, I believe Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, because what does that even mean? What does that mean? He died on the cross for our sins, but what does that mean to me? And Christians are like, admit it, say it. And he is like, I'm still in my walk trying to figure it out. And I don't blame him. Everyone's in a different walk in their life with Christ and on those things. And, the way he talks about the Bible, I love. It's so enriching. I learned so much from him. He changed my life in 2017 when I wasn't a Christian. It wasn't Christianity, but it was because I read 12 Rules for Life. And that was in the middle of college when, I felt like I was part of the white problem, patriarch, and I was an issue. It was true. That's what it felt like. And then I'm in college, I'm in my dorm room, and there's YouTube, and what comes up is his interview with none other than Joe Rogan. And I'm listening to this guy, I'm like, that makes some sense. Cool. And then I see an interview with GQ with Kathy, I think her name was, or G something. And I see that interview, and I'm like, this guy is speaking to what I'm experiencing. I remember vividly having that visceral emotion being like, dude, I've been told this and subtly feeling it, but I've just always rejected it, that I am a problem. I'm a white male. I'm a big problem of society today. I need to fix what I'm doing. And I'm just like, dude, how did I get uphold to all these weird standards that I've never done anything wrong? I feel like I haven't done anything. Right. And this guy made me feel like, oh, I'm being heard and I know what's going on. And when I read his book, with the whole clean your bedroom, make sure your bed's set, all these things, and like stand upright with your shoulders, and he's bringing the psychological component to it, like it changed my life. It truly did. And, the biggest thing now is they've been wanting to talk about a Christian, and then going back to it, weaving around now, he's had this debate with the 20 atheists. Funny how they said one Christian versus 20 atheists, and then they changed it to Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists.
Which also should have been the title in the first place.
Exactly.
It's way more clickable.
Yeah, exactly. More SEO. We know that.
Yeah, you see how we think back
then. Exactly. But he goes on there, and you could tell Jordan Peterson was in there. He'd not watched this Jubilee stuff. I believe that.
I don't think he had watched it.
He would know if you're having Charlie Kirk in there, and you're having freaking Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro, and there's these viral clips, like, as much as I love Jordan Peterson, he's also kind of a boomer. And like, I don't know how much he knows technologically. Like, he's always like, Michaela's always handling this stuff. I'm just going up to these meetings and handling it. And you could tell that guy went in there with the intrigue to want to understand where these atheists stand when he's having these conversations. And you have a couple of these individuals who are trying to get the clicks. And you're trying to do the gotcha moment, because that's going to send you into the spotlight, which some of these guys are now in the spotlight, and they're getting the attention, and they're getting their atheists, wing group, lefties, whatever that might look like, to rally with them, and they're getting this sort of quick fame because it's a takedown, and that's awesome. You could tell he wasn't in there for that. And, there's a couple moments where he did get, I gotcha. And do I think some of these debaters came in with good intention? I think there was a few. There was that one girl, Zizia or whatever her name was. I feel like she asked great questions and was curious. Then you have the two other guys where it's all semantics. It's all about trying to trap him and get him to say something wrong and hold him. And it's like, look, Jubilee, you guys are all about debates and catching people and doing highlights. I don't know how constructive that is for our culture today. Good on for you guys. You guys are getting a bag. If that's what you want, fine. But understand, you're not helping with anything. Even with those middle ground conversations, you guys know what you're doing. And everyone should be aware of that. I will tune in and watch it. Like, it's intriguing. You watch this stuff, you're like, oh wow, this is an interesting debate, but it's all gotchas. And you have that person, these two guys who are going at Peterson, and they come in and they're like, Julian, it's a pleasure to meet you. Oh, what do you think? So what's your definition of that? That's interesting. Well, if you say that, this is what this means. And guess what, Julian? You're wrong.
Yeah.
So you have a fallacy. You're wrong. And because of that, your whole belief system, you're nobody.
Right.
It was no good intention. And it comes back to what this podcast is about, where it's like, we're not about the gotchas. We're about a constructive conversation. And to Jordan Peterson's fault, he should understand Jubilee is not about that. Jubilee is all about the gotcha moments,
Right.
and they want the angry, the yelling. That's the clips.
I mean, he should have been able to tell that, though. There's fucking 20 people in a chair running to the other chair to tag it to get in. I mean,
You should have been aware
you
of
know
that.
what I mean?
And
you gotta know that. And like, even he does all these faces. Like, someone would sit down and he just goes,
he's so into it. He's eccentric. He's so eccentric.
He's very eccentric. I just, it feels a little bit, I don't know. I'm still trying to process how to explain this. Like, I know it in my head. I haven't been able to get it in words right, but it's weird. I'll start there. It's very weird. The attacks coming, it's like the attacks are now coming in like this. And I will go back to this point about whether or not he said, oh, Jesus Christ is my savior or whatever. Like, you gotta let people have their own journey with stuff, and you should not throw the baby out with the bathwater with people. If you're someone who believes that and will openly say that to everyone because that's what your religion tells you to say, you know, great. But if someone else won't say that because they're going through their own process with it and they're adhering, they love the Christian story and they're adhering to a lot of the things that make people a Christian and make the beautiful part of that religion, I think that should be celebrated rather than be excoriated for the last 10% you won't go because you're not there yet personally. And this is where I run into a huge problem with any organized religion because there becomes this dogma of strict adherence and it's groupthink. And I can tell you, Jordan Peterson is anti-groupthink on anything. And I think that's a huge reason why he viscerally will not say things out loud because he's like, in his head, he's like, how is that different than people saying trans lives matter? Now, obviously it is.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I mean?
Okay.
And I think he knows it's different too.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept, as he would say, the concept, I see where this road goes. You know, I can see how he would think that because I also have a brain that thinks like that. I am very anti-groupthink. It's a big part of the reason why I don't adhere to an organized religion. I believe in God. I have my own relationship with that. I take aspects of things that I think are great, and I'm on my own journey with some of that stuff. But I don't, you know, to me, like the perfect encapsulation of it was actually a line in The Departed when Jack Nicholson's talking in the beginning to Matt Damon's kid character. And it's just like an aside, but he goes, you go to church, kneel, stand, kneel, stand. And I just think kneel, stand in my head all the time. And the point is, you're just going along with the motions because that's what it says to do because someone interpreted the book that said we should do this and we should be in charge of this, which means you people got to do this. And by the way, make sure you put your fucking cash in the thing because that's what's going to keep the roof on this place. And there's something about that is so cynically, completely against what religion should be to me. And so I can see how a guy like Peterson would be a little hesitant to do things that are going to say, hey, I'm a member of the team here. So I think it's unfair. Like, and the point I really disagree with Wes on is that Peterson has a little bit of a different interpretation of what the resurrection could be. And Wes is like, if you don't believe in the resurrection as it's written, you're not a Christian. And I'm like, bullshit, Wes Huff. Who the fuck are you? Are you God? I like Wes. But who are you? You're God? And he loves it. He says this on every show. He brought it up. He goes out of his way to say this. And I'm like, of all the people to attack in this world right now, you're going to go after Jordan Peterson because he's got a little bit of a different opinion on something? That's not very Christian. Sorry. It's not.
It's not very... See, I understand what Wes is saying because, again, your relationship with God in the Christian faith is also extremely personal. And I know there's a big thing of sharing the good news, and that's important, and I get that. But also where people's walk in faith are, it's... Who are you to criticize someone when they're in their walk of faith? You know what I mean? It's like where you're going, where Deef's going, where I'm going. It's like, you know, I love talking about my faith. Do I know everything about the Bible? No. You know, are there some things that are in today's culture that are talked about that I can speak so profoundly on? No. Like, I'm I'm a sinner. I freaking don't know everything, but I'm trying to learn. I think that's where I love Peterson, because he's trying to learn.
Yeah.
And I think this is the issue from the Christians, is where they are trying to get him to say these things where it's like he's not there yet. He's on his own walk, and whatever that is right now,
And there's nothing wrong with that.
there's nothing wrong with that. I think he's on his walk to figure that out, and it's beautiful, like I said, because out of everybody out there that I've watched, he breaks down the Bible better than everybody. He has a whole series where he brings in like 12 other Christians, atheists, scholars, and they go through the Bible. And they go through Genesis, they did Exodus. It is one of the most phenomenal roundtable conversations, because you have atheists coming in who are scholars giving a point of view of the Christian faith and Jesus resurrect or in Exodus. And then you have these Christian scholars talking about it as well, and it's just like these back and forths where you're learning so much. I'm like, dude, I don't see any other Christians doing this. All I see are a lot of Christians criticizing other Christians for being Christians.
Yeah.
And it's so funny how they tend to be the worst, where it's like, give these people a break.
Yeah.
There's one thing I want to talk about related to Christianity. Is that cool?
It's your show, bro.
So I wanted to bring up something that has not been talked a lot about, is the Christian persecution happening, and specifically in Africa. If you look at the world reports, obviously the worst country to be a Christian is North Korea. I think most people understand why. It's not a big fan of that.
Oh yeah, that should be common sense.
Yeah.
I never even thought of that. But
Even
yeah.
though there's still 500,000 Christians in North Korea,
There's 500,000 in there?
reported by the World Report, and it's underground. And then there's also in China.
That's pretty gangster.
So like the top 10 usually rounds out as like North Korea, then it goes like Somalia, and then Afghanistan was in the top 10 and it fell out because of the whole Kabul disaster, the withdrawal. And then so these are the top 10 most persecuted, but the most violent persecution of Christians is happening none other than in Nigeria.
Nigeria.
And this is
What's
where
their
you know
beef?
about this. You know about this, which is so funny, is the ISIS groups there
Oh.
of Boko Haram.
Yeah.
And then you have also in the Republic of Congo, which in February, this is an important story to talk about, there was 73 beheaded Christians. And it was by this Allied Democratic Republic group of Congo. They're just an ISIS sect of like Boko Haram pretty much. And these ISIS sects are essentially, they're trying to make Africa an Islamic continent. That's their goal. And their goal is to wipe out all Christians. That's their message. And what ended up happening, it was the early mornings in February, and these cars were driving in, and everyone was asleep in the town. It was like 2 or 3 a.m. And all of a sudden you start hearing, being like, come out, we need you guys. The people don't know. The Christians are like, what's going on? So they go outside, and they're getting rallied up by this Allied Democrat Republic group. And they're like, hey, come with us. We're going to take you over here. So where do they take them? They take them to their church, nearby Protestant church. And then what they do is they take them inside the church, and one by one, they behead them.
Oh.
One by one, they're just beheading them. And
Is Ali Tabrizi covering this?
this is all
Yeah.
Ali
Yeah, that's where I've
Tabrizi's
seen
doing
this.
a phenomenal job covering this, because it's just, for whatever reason, it'll make some headlines in some places, but it's just not talked a lot about. Like 1 in 5 Christians in Africa are being persecuted. 1 in 4 are being persecuted in Asia, and then 3 out of 4 in the Middle East, which I think that one's kind of also like kind of obvious for the reasons over there. But in Nigeria, that whole belt of Africa right there, the beheadings, the killings, they're using saws, they're using like hammers to like kill these Christians. And their whole goal, like they're telling them, is like, denounce your faith, denounce it. Like Christ isn't king, all these things. And they're persecuting them and killing them. And there's a horrible story that happened a decade ago in Nigeria where there was a pastor and his wife and 2 kids. And again, another ISIS sect rallied them up, and they held the pastor and they executed the girls in front of the husband and wife. And then they took the wife, executed in front of the pastor, and then they killed the pastor. And then they butchered up their body and chopped him up. And the only reason we know this is there was a kid in the roof watching this whole thing happen and witnessed it. And it's crazy to me that the Christian persecution, I don't know what it is. I think a lot of it comes down to, there's just a thing with Jesus that I guess people don't like. It's just what it is. But
don't like.
I don't understand. I understand why it doesn't get covered more or to get talked about. That's what blows my mind. You're having some independent journalist from Australia who's not even that big talking about it, and then
Should be bigger.
Should be way bigger and will be.
We're working on that.
We're working on it. And it's taking these independent journalists to talk about it, and then once they talk about it, you get a few of these main media outlets that talk about it, and then it's done. Where it's just it's crazy to me where it's like these things are not being talked about, and they're killing these people, Julian, because of their faith, which is
crazy,
freaking crazy to me. And I know there are other ones, and there's always the game of being like, well, what's happening in Israel, Palestine? What's happening to the Muslims or the Uyghurs in China? And it's like, look, I'm not playing that game. I'm just saying I've looked into this. This is something that's not talked about a lot. I just want to bring it to light. It's something that's incredibly sad to see because it's
horrible.
Innocent people, and a ton of these people, like the groups around them in that African region, the other Christians, are unafraid and continue to follow their faith despite everything that's happening there, knowing that they're in danger of literally like your kid or your wife or your cousin are going to get killed maybe in a week from now. And it's not like these Christians are like, let's arm ourselves and kill them. Like these Christians are like, they tend to be like, we're not a militant group. We just want to live by our faith, what we believe. And that's that. And it's just so sad.
It's very sad. It's tragic. What human beings still do to each other in 2025 somehow still shocks me. It shouldn't, sadly. But yeah, some of this stuff doesn't get covered, and some of it's just math.
Oh, yeah?
Which is just really sick. But the math is, if you use the old intersectionality curve, Christianity, the people you're talking about aren't associated with this, to be clear. You're talking about people in Nigeria and some of these other countries that are smaller that we don't think about, but like Christianity is a Western white man's religion with a following of 2 billion. It's the highest on the curve. From a victimhood perspective, the scales aren't low enough down the curve for people to pay attention to, and I think that's part of the problem. I don't think it's, I'm sure there's some sick people who are like, decide they got beef with like the character of Jesus. I think that's really weird and probably sick, but whether you believe in it or not, like, it seems like he was a pretty goddamn good guy. It's just something about it is, it's been that way for a long time, and we play this game to where we have to, people got to fight over whose tragedy is worse. It's all bad.
Yes.
We should treat it all the same. If anyone is killed, just start at murder. It's wrong. Then you start at, then you get to, if anyone is killed on the basis of their social background, their racial background, their country background, their ethnic background, insert anything you want here above. It's all horrible.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is what gets clicks.
Yeah, we know this.
I saw Charlie Kirk tried to get this kid at Cambridge in a gotcha, and he failed miserably. The kid was advocating for Palestine. He's like, can you name me the other genocides happening around the world? And the kid goes, Myanmar, and which is the one, which is the one that Ephraim fights. So we know about that. And then, it's really sad. I can't remember the other one he said. That's horrible right now. I can't remember it, but the point exactly, actually, to Charlie's point right there. But this kid being someone who's outspoken about genocide right now in Palestine, Charlie was trying to play the game of, well, you only care about Palestine because it's low on the curve or whatever. And the kid very quickly proved, no, I care about all of them. Any of it's wrong. We're talking about this one right now because it has the most attention. And I think that's part of the problem. We have ones that have the most attention. They should all have the highest degree of attention. It's a very similar argument to what we were talking about earlier with the human trafficking. It should be the attention of everyone.
Exactly.
And I don't know. Culturally, we are living in a really weird time right now where people are deciding what the intentions of all powerful people are, people who hold the strings to anything that we see or whatever. And I don't know. Do I know that the incentives have gotten fucked up? I'm talking the money and what pays? Hell yes.
Yes.
And do I think that within that barrel of apples, there are some rotten apples who maybe say, nah, we're going to pay attention to this, but not that? Fuck yeah. And do I think there's also probably bureaucracy in different governments around the world interfering with that? Abso-fucking-lutely. And, they're probably telling themselves they're doing it for the right reasons, but probably not in the end what it is. And I think, it is sad that a guy like Ali has to cover these stories, and, it's important though that guys like him do. And when he's here, we'll talk about it for sure.
And it's the strange intersection that you know about is these Islamic extremist groups. How are they being funded?
What do you mean?
The poaching. A lot of them are doing there for poaching.
Oh, in Africa, you're saying.
Africa.
Yeah.
And they're going after the Christians. But the funding is coming from some of these Middle Eastern, even Chinese countries that are keeping them afloat.
Because they pay for the ivory and all. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. Everything's just follow the money. Everything's interconnected. And it's like we were saying in a separate conversation earlier, people are just casualties on the board. In some of these cases, it's a macro game. Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about, and it shouldn't be this way, to be clear, I'm just saying how they look at this. What you're talking about is a micro problem.
Microaggression.
That's how. Sure. that's how they look at it, though, and it's really a goddamn shame. But I have written on my cup here, "Goodbye forever."
That's wrong. That's so wrong.
Yeah.
That's not accurate.
It's an exaggeration, but if people haven't heard it, we have Deef in studio working the sticks for the first time. How you feeling?
Feeling good.
Good.
Yeah.
So Deef was on episode 103 and 132 with me. One of my great friends, and unexpectedly someone who wanted to do this, but we haven't talked about this yet and everything. I think it's been hinted on a couple Patreon episodes, but you, Alessi, are becoming the head of content here, which you already.
COO, please.
Yeah,
No.
the COO. Whatever titles you want, you got them. You already are, but like Alessi and I have been building this thing like alone for a while, and he wears a million hats. We both do, but like the number of hats that he's added over the past 18 months especially is unbelievable, considering like where we were starting with all this and what you knew and what you had to learn.
Baby.
It's fucking incredible. So you've been doing an amazing job, but obviously you hate New Jersey.
No.
You look at New York as the city of Sodom and Gomorrah. Whereas Joe Deef and I are alive when we walk through this concrete jungle. So I knew obviously you were going to want to go to Florida at some point. To be honest, I thought you were going to come home from your wedding last year and be like, I'm out. And I was ready for that. And then you lasted like another 10, 11 months, which that's awesome. Thank you. But what I like about this is you're going to get to focus on all the shit that you're the best at that also helps me the most as well. And I got someone here who can do the in-person job fucking amazing, and we all got chemistry, which is great. But I wanted to make sure we did an episode like we have the Julian and Alessi show that we've been doing on Patreon, which I guess is going to be the Julian and Deef show.
A double D show, baby. The double D.
But, we haven't, since episode 85, when you were on long before you were working with me, we haven't done a podcast together, and I think that was well overdue. But I think people really need to know. I do love it when people in the comment sections recognize like you doing a lot of stuff here, which is great. So there's a lot of people out there who have picked up on that. But for the people that listen to the show regularly who don't understand how much you've done behind the scenes and how much you bought into this thing and made this what this is today, they need to understand that. And you're going to continue to do that with me. So I wanted to make that very clear to people. Unless he's not, this is a joke. He's not going anywhere. He's just technically moving to Florida because he hates it up here. But
Stop.
I do want to say, and we'll talk about some of the background here and give people that. And we went deep on John Rondi's show again, so you can really get the full story there. But I do want to make sure publicly, I thank you, and everyone out there has a chance to thank you for getting it to this point and helping set up this studio and get the live switching going, which is not something we did before I had you. And I've always said, like, you got to have the people who believe in you when a lot of other people don't. And you were one of those very first guys, and I didn't even know you when you first did it. So I will forever be indebted to that, and I'm very, very happy to see where you're at, see you doing your own channel, which everyone needs to go subscribe to, by the way, in case you haven't figured that out yet. And continuing to do great work with us too. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Julian. You've changed my life. That's for sure. It's crazy to say, but it's very true. This last week, I've been very pensive about the move because I've moved a few times from California, Santa Cruz, San Diego to Miami, and I lived in a bunch of places. And then coming up here, and it was just like, we always knew. Well, it was only going to be a little bit of time I was going to be up here. I didn't know how long. All I knew is I was like...
2.5 years. That's a while.
I know, it is a
Stayed
while.
a while.
I was like, what I know is I believe this guy is going to be the biggest podcaster in the world when I sent you that Snapchat when it was like under 100 subs. And I was like, dude, you're going to be the next big thing. I can't believe you're not bigger. This is wild. And I sent you that and you were like, thanks _T. I was like,
I didn't quite. You said that on John's. I said a full thank you and everything. But I did turn the phone around to my mom. I'm like, get a load of this idiot.
yeah. And I remember that thinking, because I remember when I first heard you, it was one of those rare moments where I've never experienced it, where I was like, I was listening to something which I thought was way bigger than it should be. And I was like, what the heck? I was like, I remember I went to your page twice looking at the subscriber account. I was like, this is so bizarre. And
wasn't as big as it should be?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think I said?
You said it's way bigger than it should be. I'm like, damn, I only had 100 subs.
No. It was...
Steve was over here like, oh.
No. It should have been way bigger. And... we obviously have told the story, but we met in the Lex Fridman comment section. And
you want to tell that story for people out here? We can repeat that one.
Yeah, we can repeat that. Yeah. So essentially, I had started my podcast at the time, and it was like 2020, and I was just I knew about Joe Rogan, the Lex Fridmans, all these people, and I was like, all right, Lex Fridman had a post about some equipment, and I was like, yo, what's your equipment? Even though I knew there was a 0 chance he was going to answer, but I just put it out there. And lo and behold, Julian Dorey sent me a freaking message being like, I got you, fam, and sent me 20 messages with the exact image and the actual link to each equipment I need for a podcast to start it. And I was like, dude, this guy is so generous. I'm going to give him a courtesy listen. So I remember...
courtesy listen?
So I remember because I was like, he must be a podcaster. Let's check it out. And I listened to it, and I'm like, dang, this guy's real. He's honest. Like, he's got opinions that aren't freaking from the mainstream. Just they're formulated. Mm-hmm. And then that's when we started going back and forth. And then I remember 6 months later in June, you were like, hey, dude, you've been following this thing. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm going to ride your coattails. Like, whatever you need, I'm going to help you. And you're like, yeah, when there's the time for a producer, whatever that looks like. And, at this time we're talking, you're making negative bucks a month and I'm broke, you're broke. And we're just like, we'll
figure it out.
We're going to figure it out. He's like, when it comes time to that, we'll figure it out. And then, we had a couple dates lined up. And, we were like, we got to push him off a little bit. We're not quite there yet. And then eventually in February it was
January 2023.
January 2023. But even before then, November of 2022, I'm like, dude, I'm going to come up at some point. Like, right. It's going to be sooner. And then it was January. I'm like, dude, I'm going to be there next month. And you were like, I remember you freaking out thinking like...
No, you were like, I'm here. I was like, what?
You were like, dude, I'm not in a position. Like, dude, I'm still not there. I'm still in my parents' basement. Like, dude, I haven't worked it out. Like, we're getting there, but we're not there yet. And I was like, dude, I believe in this. Like, it's now or never. That was my mentality. It's now or never. We got to make this happen. Like, I'm going all in. And at the time, my wife now, she was my girlfriend. She's the one that's not a big fan of the Northeast. Just due to the cold, she just horses. She's just not the biggest fan.
It's hard. Way of putting it.
It's hard for her to work out in the winter with the winds and all that. We understand.
Shout out to Emily for coming up here and grinding that out for 2.5 years.
Yes, shout out to my wife.
Appreciate that
for supporting that. And I told her, I'm like, hey, there's a job up there that isn't paying much right now, but it's gonna be something, and it's gonna work out. If you believe in me, let's make it happen. If you don't, I totally understand. I'd love if you'd come. And she rallied with me, and I was like, wow. And obviously when we first got up there, that's when everything started to kind of go south for a little bit of time. But it was like, I don't know, maybe it was this relentless but also idiot stubbornness and belief where I was like, it's gonna work out. Like, I just knew it. I don't know what it was. It was just, there was never a doubt. I'm like, this thing is gonna take off. It's just a matter of when. I would love it to be sooner, but it wasn't. It wasn't sooner than I thought, but it was gonna take off. And then
you'd have all the little hints, like, yeah, I ate ramen last night. I did get a meal in yesterday. I'm like, I understand.
Yeah.
Eat one more for two more days ration.
Yeah, I remember. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I worked a lot of odd jobs that year. And then, obviously it started to take off and we had some low points, but it was always this undeniable belief where I was like, speak into existence, whatever you want to call it. I just knew, I'm like, we're going to wake up one day and it's going to be the biggest show. I just knew it. It was just about time and just having patience for what it was going to be. And then, obviously we had the low points, then we went high points. It was kind of like this. People say like you grow like up and down. It went like freaking down and then it went back up, luckily. And then, it got to the point where it was like the last few months when I was talking to Emily about making the move, I was like, Julian's starting to get in a very good place. Like we've really built this thing. And that's when we started having the conversations where she was like, I can't do another winter here. And I'm like, just hold on just a little bit longer. Like we got to see this. I have to see this through.
She has a dartboard with my face on it.
No.
I know it.
No. She has immense respect for you. Immense respect.
I appreciate that.
And, as soon as I saw where I was like, when I came up here, I think you're at 200,000 subscribers. I don't remember. It was something like that.
It was, so January 2023, it would have been at about 300. I think we were at like 340, 350-ish.
350-ish.
Yeah.
And then it was, the last few months where it was just, we had great guests, great conversations. The views were translating to what they should be in my eyes, where I was like, dude, I think I finally got you to a point, not like you needed me, I should say, but got you to a point where I'm like, dude, he's taken off so much that we've created these systems in place where I'm like, he's bound to be successful if I were to be removed from the equation in an in-person capacity.
Right. Yeah. Doing this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, that's when we entertained the idea of going back to Florida, being in the sun, which we love to do. And I don't hate New Jersey. I think New Jersey has many great aspects to it that I love. The winters are hard up here.
We've turned them. We got them.
The food's unbelievable. I have nothing but good things to say other than the winters suck. That's it. That's all I have to say.
All right.
I love it up here.
So we got
regardless of
75%. That works.
Yeah, 80. We'll call it 80.
Okay.
80's good.
Yeah.
80's good. So yeah, and then it translated, and obviously, we started doing better, and you got me to a point where I could buy my first home. That's credit to you, because it's like
You did that yourself, bro.
well, you were the one helping me make it happen. But it was crazy to think, I was literally at one point pinching pennies and being like, it's gonna be okay. We're gonna work out, trust you. And then it translates over where I was just like, it was the undeniable belief in my faith and my faith in being a Christian and all that. I was like, Lord, I know Julian's going to go places. I don't know when it's going to be, but I believe it's going to get there.
And then Jesus was like, yo, that motherfucker's a heathen. Nope. Not today.
But, I say all that with just the whole story of like, coming up here where I was, where I was in my life, graduating with a pre-med degree that I planned not to use, and just like, all right, what am I going to do with my life?
I can't believe you were going to be a doctor. That's wild.
Yeah, I was going to be a doctor. The whole pre-med degree was going to do the MCAT, all that stuff. And then I was like, dude, after failing OChem 7 times, probably not a great idea. So then I, was pivoting in that time of my life where I was just, I think many young people are, where they're just confused. They're not sure where they want to go. And I took a chance on an industry that is really still not even a career path per se for many people. It's unless you want to commit your whole life to it, which you were doing. And I gravitated towards that. And, I just want to thank you so much for giving me that opportunity when, so many people could have filled that seat where, it could have been anybody. And I've always thought like, all right, I'm going to do something so extreme and out of the box. And my parents are right now questioning who they had as a kid and where he was going. And whatever it is, I'm going to give 110% forward with. And I've tried to do that day in and day out. And,
You've done that.
I appreciate that. And it's great to see. And as we've always had in the back of the mind where it's like, I always love doing my thing, which you've always encouraged, and, I don't know how these other podcasters or social media influencers or whatever you want to call have been with other employees of wanting to do their own thing, but you've been nothing but supportive of that, which is cool, and I've heard some things on the internet with horror stories of that where it's like, how dare you? You're taking away your name. Like, I'm not paying you this or that. Where you've always been like, yeah, bro, do it. And I've always saw it as like, man,
it helps our show here.
Yeah, I'm like, bro, I'm trying to be the Robin to your freaking Batman. Come on,
Yeah, that's great. Listen, I don't want to lecture people or whatever, but like, are you kidding me? Like, when your people are working in a creative capacity for you, the job means you got to come up with shit and figure out shit. And to me, what better way to do that than also having your own shit that you can do that through? And I remember when you began doing that, it was still like we were coming out of that period.
Oh, yeah.
And we were so like relying on each other 24/7 to just be working. And I was like, oh, can he wait like 3-4 months to do this? And I was like, nope, no. That is exactly what you don't say. I'm like, he needs to go fucking full bore into this and get it going. You started doing all those videos and coming up on the election like that summer where you're asking people like who they're voting. The content was incredible too. It was like man on the street stuff. And as I saw that coming along, that was exciting for me because it's like, damn, I just started myself in a room somewhere in my parents' house with no idea what the fuck I was doing. And here we are at this point, 4.5 years later. And now someone who's working with me can start to build a platform through this. It's like the coolest little tree growing. And hopefully there's more roots coming out as well beyond people, even beyond you. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.